it is true that the United States and Europe and some other places, benefited by being the first movers in the market in terms of energy. So we've had 150 years, 100 years of making big mistakes, which we didn't know were mistakes until sort of the 1980s. When Jim Hansen testified to us, I was in Congress, I was in the Senate when he testified, and he told us, hey folks, there's this thing called global climate change. And a few people were ahead of that curve, Al Gore and a few others in the Senate who were part of this effort to sort of change our behavior starting back then. I went to the first conference of the parties. I went to the Rio for the Earth Summit and subsequent meetings. And I was in Kyoto, and I've been to many, many, many of these meetings trying to undo the mistakes that were made over 100 years ago. But just because some people didn't have their chance to make those mistakes doesn't mean they ought to go do it now. We have people building coal-fired power plants right now. And we have countries funding the building of coal-fired power plants that are not abated. And by abated, I mean, there's no carbon capture, there's no restriction. So, and frankly, let's be honest with each other. Nobody can show me a method where we actually capture all the emissions. We're not close to being able to bring that deployment up to scale. And yet we hear a lot of talk about deploying more gas plants and infrastructure. Let me tell you what happens. You build infrastructure for gas plants, they'll be with you for 30 and 40 years. They're going to be there. That's the lifetime they're built for. And the problem is that the Earth doesn't have the carbon space right now. There's no way the economies of the world are going to be able to continue at the levels that close to the levels that we're at today. And what I hear in the comments that I've heard thus far is that, and you just you mentioned it, Todd, when you said it would only be 1% if the energy level of today is being supplied by gas. But that's today. It's not going to be static. It's going to grow. You want your economies to grow. We want them to grow. More and more people need to have energy. But I ask you to take note of this statistic. Today, around the world, the cheapest new electric power plant that you can install is based on renewables. I just emphasize that. That is why renewables now constitute 70% of all new electricity capacity. In the United States, we brought all the new electricity we brought online, about 80% of it was through renewables. So what we need to know is that the gas thing, yeah, it'll fill a gap where you need one. But unless you can abate it 100%, we don't want to build growth on something that is going to compound the problem. Now, Mother Nature does not measure whose emissions they are, whether they come from the US or China or Europe. We can't parcel out the carbon in that manner because Mother Nature is oversaturated with the carbon now. Let me give you another statistic to consider. Even if we get to net zero 2050, we will still have to suck 1 trillion tons of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere because of everything that's up there today and the damage it will do to us. So we need to be thinking much more sustainably here. And that's where the funding is going to go. The money is not going to continue to flow into investment for fossil fuels. It will sustain for a period of time while we transition, but that is not the future. And Africa should be building for the future using the technologies that will be part of that future.